In this video, we'll be diving into the Street Fighter universe and taking a closer look at the iconic characters Akuma, Ryu, and Ken. We'll be exploring their origins, their stories, and their place in the Street Fighter timeline. So grab your fighting gear and get ready for an epic journey through the world of Street Fighter. Without further ado, let me welcome you to the Street Fighterverse. His father, a wealthy hotel tycoon owner, told Ken at the age of 12 that his son had to learn discipline or else he would become a spoiled brat and try to inherit their family fortune. In order to do so, the elder masters sent Ken to train under his best friend, the mysterious karate master, Gouken. At first, Ken was very hesitant to learn from Gouken, wanting to go back to the United States, but later began to respect his master. He even enjoyed the company of Gouken's adopted son, Ryu. Ryu and Ken would later become best friends and each other's principal rivals. In Street Fighter Alpha, Ken fought and won the premier US martial arts tournament that had been previously won by Charlie Nash, as well as meeting a very attractive girl named Eliza, who became his girlfriend. After winning the US martial arts tournament, the heroic story that Ryu defeated the Emperor of Muay Thai reaches his ears. He asks Ken what it means to be a true fighter. He wonders if he should use the same fist he used to defeat Sagat, or the other one Akuma uses to murder people. Ken sees that Ryu has gone back to his usual bad habit of overthinking things, and fights him as an attempt to wake him up. After defeating Ryu, Ken realizes he has been deeply troubled since his last victory over Sagat. He reminds Ryu to keep fighting in order to find the answer, and gives him his red hairband, that whenever he feels lost, he should use it as a reminder of their fight, and to keep fighting to find the answer. Ryu happily takes the headband, and they both go their separate ways. Ken returns home and, with Eliza's support, begins training harder, knowing even with his recent feelings that Ryu is always stronger than he looks. Ken begins to wonder about his own life. Along the road to proving himself again, he encounters Karin, who tells him she has followed his career and is trying to best her rival Sakura. To prove she is superior, Ken advises her it's good to have a rival, not for supremacy, but to keep on training harder and focusing. Going off to meet up with Sakura, they have a friendly match and Ken finally realizes that Ryu has the right idea all along. Both he and Sakura begin to travel to find Ryu, but their path crosses with that of Shadowloo's dictator and Bison. Ken confronts him, but he is easily defeated and placed under Bison's hypnosis. Bison then uses brainwashed Ken to lure Ryu out of hiding. Once Ryu shows up, Bison makes Ken fight him. Ryu wins and manages to release Ken of Bison's mind control. Ryu then proceeds to fight Bison, but loses and, just like Ken before him, is turned into a slave of Bison's psycho power. Sagat appears and, enraged by Bison's actions, engages Ryu in an attempt to break Bison's mental grip on him. Ken, now free and aided by Sakura, attacks Bison. This intervention, along with Sagat's presence, makes Ryu come to his senses. Recovered, Ryu takes on Bison once more. Bison senses Ryu's dark power and attempts to manipulate Ryu's mind once again. At his friend's urging, Ryu resists and defeats Bison with a powerful Hadouken. Ken is happy to see his old friend again. With the promise of a new duel, the two part their ways. In Street Fighter 2, Ken receives a letter from Ryu, where he describes his consistent immersion in daily training, which rekindled Ken's fighting spirit. Realizing that he's been slacking on his own training, Ken goes back into the world of fighting. After the events of Street Fighter 2, Ken is married to Eliza, something he had apparently vowed only to do after winning a decisive victory against Ryu. However, it is unknown if the two fought during the tournament, or if Ken actually won, if they even did. No details have been stated. In Street Fighter 2 Complete File, it states that he lost to Ryu and continued his training. In Super Street Fighter 4, when a new tournament is announced, Ken is unsure whether to compete, as Eliza is now far along in pregnancy, and he doesn't want to leave her. Sensing his inner conflict, Eliza assures him that she'll be fine, and that the baby isn't due for a while yet, so he should go meet up with Ryu and tell him she says hi. Ken enters, and in the absence of gas stations near the location for the final, he parks his SUV in a convenient spot, calls Eliza to check on her, and continues the rest of the way on foot. Over the course of the tournament, he encounters his self-appointed rival, Rufus, although the results of that match are unknown. After the tournament, it is discovered that Gouken is still alive, and Ken and Ryu pursues him as he leaves. Ken is upset that Gouken has not said anything to them, but Gouken counters that they no longer need a master. Ken and Ryu head home on foot, and Rufus passes by them on his motorbike, calling them losers. Soon, however, Rufus's bike runs out of gas, and Ken and Ryu reach the SUV. Ken offers Rufus and his girlfriend Candy a lift, but Rufus refuses. Soon afterwards, their son is born, and they name him Mel. In Street Fighter V, Ken, Eliza, and Mel are invited into a party hosted by Karin. During the party, Ken reflects on the various sparring matches between him and Ryu. The family gets lost on the way to the party and encounters Birdie, who thinks they are trespassing, resulting in a fight with Ken. Karin arrives and offers Ken a pre-meal fight as an apology for Birdie attacking him, which Ken accepts. Afterwards, he and Eliza wonder about why Ryu isn't at the party. In A Shadow Falls, on the main story, Ken came to visit Ryu, who was in the middle of meditating, after getting defeated in a sparring match with Ken. Ryu tells him that he will join them when his training is complete. Later, Ken arrives with the rest of the fighters called by Karin to the Kansuki estate, where they plan their first infiltration of the Shadowloo base. Ken, Chun-Li, and Cammy travel to Brazil to search for the first missing chess piece, held by Lara Matsuda. While there, he saves Sean from Fang, but he is then attacked by his older sister Laura, who mistakes him for an enemy. After the fight, Sean sorts out the misunderstanding by indicating the unconscious Shadowloo soldiers. Laura then decides to join them, but on the condition that Ken add Matsuda Jujitsu into his selection of online karate classes, which he agrees to. Chun-Li then leaves to assist Karin in the group's first infiltration. Ken remains with Laura, and the duo fend off more Shadowloo soldiers, with Ken taking out 3 with a single Shoryuken. Ken reunites with Ryu just before the group begins the final assault against Shadowloo. After Bison's final defeat at Ryu's hands and Shadowloo's destruction, Ken finds Ryu alone and meditating, and decides to have another friendly sparring match to see if Ryu has found his true answer. Ryu manages to defeat Ken, but drops his red headband. Ken hands it back to him, figuring he might still need it. The two are later seen sharing a friendly fist bump. In Street Fighter III, a Brazilian teenager named Sean had been pestering him to become his student, and Ken reluctantly accepted, beginning to train him. Maintaining a home and raising a child has strained his relationship with Ryu. Ken gets in touch with Ryu and invites him to a Japanese hot spring inn. Ken also brings Sean along, but decides to do last-minute shopping for Eliza before flying to Japan. In reality, Ken purposely left Sean alone to see how he'll do in a street fight. Ken then entered the World Warrior tournament. He fought Sean in the tournament and won against him. However, he drops out upon realizing Ryu was defeated by Oro. Ken begins to train his son Mel in rudimentary fighting techniques. He also told Sean to go find Ryu and challenge him, giving him some free time with Eliza. He learned that Ryu had sought him out and traveled all the way to New York from Oakland for their long-awaited rematch. Tossing some friendly jabs at each other, both have a good fight, ultimately won by Ryu. Since then, Ken has continued to train Sean and Mel, handle his family and business, and keep up with his old friend Ryu. In Sean's ending, Ken wakes up Sean, who was beaten unconscious after being knocked down by his opponent in the first round. In Ken's ending, he wins his 3rd straight US Martial Arts tournament, which is a new record, and offers the trophy to Sean, who turns the offer down, wanting to earn it for himself. In the Street Fighter VI comic, in this chapter, Ken, the acting chairman of board at Masters Foundation, discusses the inclusion of cryptocurrency and microinsurance projects in Neisha's communication infrastructure business. His colleagues express concerns about rushed economic aid projects and advise him to consult his father. However, Ken asserts his authority and refuses to involve his father. Jackson, his advisor, tries to reason with him. Meanwhile, Ken's son, Mel, expresses frustration with his father's lack of consideration. Luke, escorting Mel, interrupts their conversation. Ken is informed about a special emergency passageway by Kalima, a secretary. They meet JP, the venue owner, who presents Ken with a sacred cerulean cloth. The king of Neishal invites Ken to participate in the tournament, despite his reluctance. Later, Ken consults Jackson, and they're interrupted by a roadblock of protesters. Shots are fired, injuring Ken and Jackson. Their car explodes, killing Jackson and the driver. Ken escapes and is rescued by Tsujimoto and a woman. In Chapter 2, Ken wakes up in an apartment and sees Tsujimoto. Ken asks who he is and tries to get up, but he's still recovering from the gunshot wound. Chun-Li then shows up, commenting that Ken shouldn't move yet. Ken asks what happened to Jackson, and she says that they couldn't get to him in time, and Ken is saddened to hear of his death. After Chun-Li explains to Ken about the video transmitted by Amnesia and that he's in custody of Interpol, Ken gets angry and shouts that he had nothing to do with this, but Chun-Li knocks him back and points a gun at him, telling him to calm down. She's aware that Ken is being framed and that they're currently looking for a way to prove his innocence. However, because the whole world saw the video, he wouldn't be safe, and so he can't leave. Ken then asks what happened to Mel, and Chun-Li is shocked that his son is here. Ken begs that he needs to call his son. However, she leaves the room and makes a call, making Ken frustrated. Ken asks Sujimoto if he could help with the gunshot wound and he complies, only for Ken to knock him out to find the culprits behind this and to clear his name. In Chapter 3, Ken wakes up from a nightmare and tries to leave without being spotted. While avoiding military personnel, he stumbles upon a man running away and accidentally trips over a kid. Suddenly, an explosion occurs, and Ken checks on the child's well-being. However, upon recognizing Ken from the news, the kid runs away. Spotting the explosion, 2 personnel notice Ken and he is forced to flee. Luke catches up with Ken and they are joined by JP. Ken questions how JP was able to find him, and JP explains that he utilized the surveillance network system developed with Ken's funding. Ken further inquires how JP knew he would find the abandoned building, but JP interrupts, stating that Ken's chapter was destined to conclude there. JP reveals his plan and Ken attempts to attack him, but to no avail. JP employs his drone to show Ken a captured Mel, tied up and blindfolded. Mel expresses his faith in his father's goodness, but the transmission is cut short. Ken threatens JP, but JP reveals a drone hidden under Mel's chair and hands Ken his dropped phone. The phone displays a map with drone icons and a detonation button. JP explains that if Ken pushes the button to save Mel, another drone will explode elsewhere, potentially causing harm to others. Ken initially believes JP is bluffing, but one of the drone icons triggers an explosion, proving JP's seriousness. JP gives Ken additional motivation by showing Mel once again, this time with a timer counting down from 3 minutes. Ken pleads with JP to stop, but JP uses his cane to decrease the timer and urges Ken to make the right choice. Overwhelmed, Ken decides to save Mel, but loses contact with his son. Luke demands Ken surrender, but before they can act, a woman grabs Ken and they jump through a window, landing in a river. In Chapter 4, Ken acknowledges to Kalima that she was right about him not considering the well-being of people and the country. However, he accuses her of being involved in the setup and video clip, angering her. Kalima insists that she is not like JP, and clarifies that the opposition had nothing to do with the recent events or the masked attackers. She reveals that many of her comrades were wrongly arrested due to the video and bombings. Kalima explains that JP's true intentions are to use the tournament as a means to launder money and steal funds through online betting. She warns Ken that JP will use Mel to draw him out. Kalima wanted Ken to understand the plight of people and emphasized that only the citizens can solve the country's problems. Ken resolves to save his son and confront JP. At the arena, Ken finds Mel's room empty and encounters a fighter named Boris. Stealing his clothes to disguise himself, Ken confronts JP, and Luke, JP's associate, tries to intervene. Ken attacks Luke, injuring his eye. Luke accuses Ken of teaming up with terrorists and reveals his personal vendetta against Ken for his father's death. Despite his injuries, Ken finds strength in his son's voice and fights back. Ken defeats Luke but chooses to surrender when offered the chance to see Mel again. He is subsequently arrested. After being released, Ken walks the streets in a depressed state but maintains his fighting spirit as he raises his fist, signifying his determination to continue.
Mel Masters is a dynamic character in the Street Fighter series, known as the son of Ken and Eliza Masters, as well as the nephew of Julia, Guile's wife. In Street Fighter 4, The Ties That Bind, Eliza, Ken's wife, is captured by Sea Viper to lure Ryu. Ken embarks on a daring rescue mission, overcoming formidable obstacles to save her. After a fierce battle, Ken emerges victorious and reunites with Eliza, relieved and overjoyed. In that pivotal moment, Eliza reveals their life-changing news. She is pregnant. The revelation fills their hearts with a mix of excitement, responsibility, and love as they anticipate the arrival of their child. United by their shared victory and the promise of a growing family, Ken and Eliza embark on a new chapter, fortified by their unbreakable bond and the determination to protect and nurture their future generation. Amidst the triumph of his Super Street Fighter 4 victory, Ken's ending reveals the birth of his son, marking marking the dawn of a new legacy. In the Street Fighter V prologue, the Master's family, including Mel, attends a party hosted by Karin. Though mostly asleep, Mel awakens during a fierce battle between his father Ken and Karin. During the events of A Shadow Falls, Mel crosses paths with his father Ken, who entrusts him with the task of protecting his mother while he embarks on a mission to Brazil alongside Chun-Li and Cammy. And Street Fighter III series, a young and determined Mel Masters, just 3 years old, makes a memorable appearance in Ken's ending. Inspired by his father's legacy, Mel expresses his heartfelt desire to follow in Ken's footsteps and train alongside him. In a touching moment, Ken encourages his young son enthusiasm and instructs him to give it his all. However, due to his tender age and limited physical reach, Mel's valiant effort to strike his father with all his might ends up connecting with a comical yet unexpected target. The light-hearted mishap adds a touch of humor to the scene, showcasing the unique bond between father and son, and what is his importance in Street Fighter VI. For that, let's delve into the new Street Fighter comics. As Mel enters his teenage years, the advice from his father Ken weighs heavily on his shoulders. Ken urges him to explore the world and broaden his horizons, but Mel finds solace and joy in the company of his friends and the world of gaming. Frustration and a sense of resentment starts to simmer within Mel as he struggles to comprehend why his father insists on pushing him towards a different path. In the intriguing first chapter of Days of the Eclipse, Mel awakens at an airport and meets his guide, Luke, on their way to Nashal. Mel disagrees with Luke's view that the world is expanding, feeling it is actually shrinking since they reached Nashal in just one day. He corrects Luke's mistaken belief about Nigeria's location. In a phone call with his father Ken, Mel expresses frustration about his father's lack of concern for his own desires, leading to tension. Luke teases Mel about having a girlfriend. Mel reminds Luke of their upcoming ceremony and dismisses the idea of befriending newcomers. Mel shares his experience encountering wolves with his father in the mountains of Alaska, contradicting Luke's wolf impression. Luke gives Mel a fruit and a pocket knife, symbolizing the importance of mastering outdoor skills. In Chapter 2, Luke informs Mel that their arrival is imminent. However, Mel's frustration is evident as he responds with a sigh. Upon reaching the Nashal martial arts fighting tournament arena, Mel realizes that his father has not responded to his message. Worried, he attempts to call him, but his efforts are interrupted by a message from the hacktivist group known as Amnesia. The message accuses Ken Masters of being associated with terrorism, shocking Mel to the core. In light of the disturbing revelation, Luke swiftly takes charge, prioritizing Mel's safety. They make their own way to the city where Luke engages in a conversation with his superior, discussing the current situation. With orders from his boss, Luke is instructed to return to headquarters, and Mel is to accompany him. Meanwhile, Men finds himself captivated by a video detailing the allegations against his father. The weight of the accusations and the uncertainty surrounding his father's innocence loom over him, leaving him in a state of unease and confusion. In Chapter 3, Mel expresses his concern for his father's innocence to Luke, who unfortunately needs to leave. Luke shares his regret about not being able to play the monster game with Mel. Mel attempts to return Luke's knife, but Luke insists he keeps it as they part ways. As they exit the building, Luke receives a notification that Mel has accepted his friend request. Suddenly, Mel is kidnapped by a mysterious figure wearing an amnesia mask. JP shows Ken his son, bound to a chair and blindfolded. JP informs Ken that if he triggers the drones with his phone, Mel will be saved but others may be harmed. Alternatively, if Ken refuses to cooperate, the drone underneath Mel's chair will explode. Determined to save his son, Ken manages to halt the timer but loses all communication with Mel. In Chapter 4, Mel, who is still tied up in a chair and blindfolded, starts moving and is able to fall out of the chair and notices Luke's pocket knife. He's able to grab it and escapes. At the arena, Mel is able to find Luke and tries to talk to him. However, he sees his dad in the ring and Luke ends up fighting him. Mel uses a broken drone and he's able to talk to his dad. Mel is disheartened to see his dad being arrested and thinks that the world that he lost him to is too big for him. Sometime later at Ken's office, Mel stares at the window while some employee is moving boxes. The employee tells Mel that they need to lock the room, and the two leave. Mel thinks to himself that wherever his dad is, he can see him.
Ryu was orphaned when he was a young child, and has no memory of his parents, or whether they are alive. He was found and adopted by a man named Gouken, who raised Ryu in his secluded dojo and trained Ryu in the ways of his martial arts. Sometime afterwards, Gouken would later train his best friend's spoiled son, Ken masters. Ken served not only as a sparring partner, but also gave Ryu a friend in the form of a boy of his own age. Ryu looked up to Gouken as a father figure, and regards Ken as his best friend and surrogate brother, a relationship which remains to this day. When Ryu turned 23 years old, Gouken believed that Ryu was ready to travel the world in order to test and hone his martial skills against the best fighters from around the world. After Ryu and Ken's training was complete, Ken casually asks Ryu which of the two will be recognized as a reputable martial artist first. While Ken goes to the USA, Ryu enters the World Warrior Tournament and travels to Thailand alone. The story goes that Sagat holds the first World Warrior Tournament to prove that he was the god of Muay Thai. After all, he had defeated all of his challengers, and to also prove he is the strongest man in the world. Word came across that a young Asian martial artist named Ryu had defeated a great quantity of Muay Thai fighters. Looking for a challenge, Ryu and Sagat fight against each other. During the fight, something dark wakes up inside of Ryu, attacks Sagat with a Shoryuken, and leaves a massive scar on his chest, nearly killing him in the act. The story follows that Ryu imposes victory over the menacing Muay Thai fighter, Sagat. Meanwhile, Sagat, swearing vengeance on Ryu for his loss. An allegedly updated version of this event takes that Sagat was winning the fight. It states that Sagat tried to help Ryu from the floor, when suddenly Ryu's dark Hado kicks in and takes a cheap shot against Sagat and defeats him. Sagat becomes insane, and then is recruited by Bison for the Shadow Loop. In the Street Fighter Alpha series, Ryu, after becoming the strongest fighter in the world, encounters and fights Akuma on a secluded island known as Gouken, and wins. However, Akuma was only testing him and senses that Ryu has the same powers as he does. He proceeds to tell Ryu about the Satsui no Hado, a power that consumes the practitioners of their shared fighting style, driving them to win, even when it means killing the opponent. Akuma then uses his fist to smash the island, leaving Ryu stranded. Sometime after escaping the island, Ken finds Ryu. He asks Ken what it means to be a true fighter. He wonders if he should use the same fist he used to defeat Sagat, or the one Akuma uses to murder people. Ken sees that Ryu's has gone back to his usual bad habit of overthinking things and fights him as an attempt to wake him up. After defeating Ryu, Ken realizes that he has been deeply troubled since his last victory over Sagat. He reminds Ryu to keep fighting in order to find the answers, and gives him his red hairband, and that whenever he feels lost, he should use it as a reminder of their fight and to keep fighting to find the answer. Ryu happily takes the headband, and they both go their separate ways. Soon thereafter, a fan of his, named Sakura, comes up and expresses her desire to train under him. Ryu replies that he himself still has much to learn about, but allows Sakura to take a picture of him for now. At some point, Ryu is found by Sagat, who is out for a grudge match. Ryu protests that Sagat hasn't fully recovered from their last bout, but Sagat persists. Ryu lets Sagat win, rather than do any further damage, and Sagat leaves. Only later, upon reflection, does Sagat realize that Ryu held back, vowing to fight him again. Ryu continues to be troubled by what Akuma had told him, compounded by his encounter with Rose, who has intricate ties to Bison. She tells him that he cannot defeat Bison unless he fights him at the cost of his soul. True to form, when Ryu confronts Bison, he is defeated despite putting up a valiant fight. Bison takes the semi-conscious Ryu and begins brainwashing him, using the revelation that the Satsui no Hado is akin to Bison's own psycho power. This scene is interrupted by the entrance of Sagat, Ken, and Sakura. While Ken and Sakura distract Bison, Sagat fights to brainwash Ryu, quickly noticing the effects Bison's brainwashing has had on him. At Sagat's urging, Ryu comes to his senses to confront and defeat Bison, destroying him temporarily. In Street Fighter II, during the World Warrior Tournament, Ryu enters to test his skills and defeats many of the new warriors. He encourages Ken to re-enter as well. It is said, it is unknown how far Ryu himself progressed in the tournament. It is also said that Ryu, avoiding Bison's flaming remnants after his body was destroyed by Akuma, hinting that Ryu made it to the finals. In Street Fighter IV, after the second World Warrior Tournament, Ryu continued his journey and ended up in an isolated desert where he trained. Ryu then remembers his argument with Akuma, with Akuma urging Ryu to give into the Dark Hado, or else he will kill him. Ryu then leaves the desert and goes to a bar where he meets a biker. The biker then tells him a story about an American martial arts champion who abandoned his family. Believing it to be Ken, Ryu visits the house of the said champion, but it's ambushed by Sea Viper. Suddenly, the Delta Red agent Cammy then attempts to ambush Sea Viper. However, Cammy was also no match for Viper, and Viper then tortures Cammy, which the Dark Hado then takes over Ryu and engages Sea Viper, but would easily defeat her. Luckily for Viper, she manages to escape the possessed Ryu. Angered, Ryu then slaughters multiple SIN scientists who witnessed the fight until Ken and Sakura arrive to save Ryu and help Cammy. Sakura would then retain the possessed Ryu as Ken calls the hospital to help Cammy. Ryu would then regain his consciousness and realize what he has done. After being sent to Ken's mansion, Ryu realizes he has been targeted by SIN and its leader Seth for their evil plans. With Gals' plans to infiltrate Seth's cruise ship to incarcerate him, Ryu then tags along, knowing that Seth would be waiting for him. After traveling to the base, Ryu and Ken then dispatch multiple SIN thugs before Ryu encounters Seth himself. Ryu and Seth then engage, with Seth easily overpowering Ryu and giving him his twisted philosophy of power. Ryu then admits that he never understood what power is, and that he understands Seth's philosophy by stating that the power he describes is not what he's after. Seth, unamused, continues beating up Ryu before Ryu awakens a new power and nearly kills Seth with it. Ryu then collapses from this power. A few days later, Ryu and Ken then part ways, with Ryu stating that they will meet again. On the continuation of Street Fighter IV, Ryu then enters into a new tournament to further master his skills as well as reunite with his long-mate friend, Ken, for another rematch. During his journey, he meets up with Sakura, whom he encouraged to train harder. Meanwhile, Ryu also meets up with Sagat once more. The two fight, and while the result of the fight is unknown, it is implied that Ryu won. During the final round with the tournament host Seth, actually a copy of him, he defeats him in the SIN headquarters. During and after this battle, the building fell around them as Ryu unleashed the Satsui no Hado on the Bleast machine, a weapon of mass destruction developed by SIN that harnessed the energy in the human body. During this event, Sakura, who has been searching for Ryu, finds him and the Bleast machine, and a pulse of energy from it knocks her into a wall. Ryu defends her by unleashing a Shoryuken on the machine, and they leave the building together, the weapon destroyed. He then encounters Gouken, who has in fact survived his last battle with Akuma, and Gouken uses the power of nothingness to seal the Satsui no Hado, which is eating at Ryu, knocking him unconscious. Akuma then arrives on the scene to challenge his brother for a death duel, the winner of which will claim Ryu. The outcome of the duel is unknown, but since Ryu is later seen free of the Dark Hado's influence, it is very likely that either Gouken won or the battle ended in a draw, possibly interrupted. Later, Ryu and Ken chase their long-lost master along a cliff face, with Ken wanting Gouken to stick around while Ryu wishes him well. Afterwards, he and Ken are walking through the desert while Rufus mocks them on his motorcycle, though it later breaks down and he is left pushing it while Ryu and Ken drive by in Ken's Jeep. Ryu later bids Sakura farewell as she, Dan, and Blanca leave for a home on a cruise ship. Sometime later, having decided that his battles have made him stronger, he meets a no older Sakura. What happens next is unknown, although Gouken might have taught Ryu the Shin Shoryuken and the Denji Hadouken at some point before Street Fighter III. In Street Fighter V, Ryu in his dream is fighting against his evil self, claiming to him that the power to kill will make him stronger, which he ultimately rejects. Gouken is in a sparring match during the incident. Ryu charges himself into the Satsui no Hado and attempts to hit his master with a single Hadouken. It explodes in a flash of light. Ryu wakes up from his dream with Gouken telling him that the Satsui no Hado almost consumed him. Rashid and Assam find Ryu, introducing himself as a hero who travels the world. Gouken questions Rashid why he comes to see Ryu. Rashid states he wants to challenge Ryu in a match, which is to test his mettle. Ryu doesn't immediately get up to fight, worrying about the Satsui no Hado, which confuses Rashid and has Gouken questioning him why he didn't do it, citing Ryu's quote, "The answer lies in the heart of battle." Ryu eventually gets up and spars with Rashid, resulting in a victory. Rashid learns from the fight about himself. He thanks Ryu for the lesson and leaves. Ryu decides that he should leave too, and better understand his power. Gouken tells Ryu to meet Ken, who has been concerned about him. Ryu and Ken finally meet in Brazil. Ken was told by Gouken about Ryu's struggle with the Satsui no Hado, and thinks a good match can solve it. Afterwards, Ryu still worries about the Satsui no Hado. Ken reassures Ryu that if Ryu falls over to the dark side, he'll take him down and stop it. Ken tells Ryu to just relax and fight. Ryu goes to China and gets ambushed by a Shadowloo soldier. Nash comes in and takes down the soldier. Nash expected to see Ryu, which triggers a bit of Satsui no Hado within him. Nash says that they have to fight so he can understand the power and know its limits. The fight ultimately ends in a draw. Nash is surprised by the power, having it surpass his expectations. Ryu tells him that he tries to suppress the power and struggles with it, but has decided to not let it take him over, which Nash respects. Ryu thanks him for the fight and Nash leaves. A shadow falls. Ryu meets with Dalsum and says he is still struggling with the Satsui no Hado and needs help. They decide to have a spar. After the spar, Dalsum tells him that suppressing the power will eventually lead the power to consuming him. He tells him that he needs to face the Hado and conquer it. Nekali drops down from above, looking to consume fighters' souls. Dalsum defends Mahesh, while Ryu fights Nekali. Nekali overpowers Ryu, which almost triggers his dark power. Dalsum takes Ryu's punch, proclaiming that he cannot let the Hado take him over. Dalsum fights off Nekali. Ryu notices a black moon veering over and blocking the sun, which gives him visions of bison. Nekali eventually melts away temporarily. He is told about Nekali by Dalsum, telling him that Nekali is an ancient being that consumes warriors' souls and only appears when many warriors are needed in a crisis. Ryu concludes that the world is in crisis because of the black moons. Ryu finally joins up with Ken, Chun-Li, and Karin as they team up to make a final assault against Shadowloo. As Chun-Li defeats Fang while rescuing Li Fen, Ryu finally faces off against Bison, who is ready to challenge him, and Ryu states that his strength was to push forward, and he is ready to fight him too. After an epic long battle, Bison isn't giving up yet, until Ryu hits him with the Hadouken, infused with the power of nothingness, seemingly hinting at Ryu's mastery of the power and sublimation of the Satsui no Hado. Bison's body begins to crack as it dissipates in a flash of light, defeating the madman. As the base is about to be destroyed, Ryu, Guile, Chun-Li, and Li Fen escape. Chun-Li is slow to catch up, so Ryu uses his Denjin Hadouken to stop the fires from the explosion. After the incident, Ryu is meditating. Ken visits him for the second time. He challenges him for a friendly sparring match. As he tells Ryu to prove if he already found his answer, Ryu is able to defeat Ken, as Ken also manages to knock Ryu's red headband. As it falls on the ground, Ryu realizes that he already found the answer to his true strength. As he gets his headband, Ken is happy to see his friend has grown, and Ryu also says that he still needs his headband for the battle. The two are later seen having a friendly fist bump with each other. In the Street Fighter III, at the age of 33, Ryu continues his traveling day to day with the aim of becoming a true warrior. Since Ken is now the father of a child, their relationship has deteriorated. After a long time from being home in Japan, he is summoned to a hot spring inn, where Ken wishes to meet him and introduces him to his new student, Shan Matsuda. Ryu enters the Third World Warrior Tournament to further advance his fighting abilities. His most notable fight during the tournament is against Hugo, who is able to withstand his Shin Shoryuken and hold his own. He continues his travels afterward, meeting Oro along the way. Ryu ends up being defeated by Oro, who likes him to be his successor. Ryu later fights against Shan, who has been asked by Ken to fight him. Ryu easily defeats him from time to time, with just a single Hadouken, as he noticed his actions. Ryu also serves as Hugo's pro wrestling tag team partner for a brief period of time before moving on, also shown in Hugo's storyline. A year later, Ryu meets up with Ken for a friendly match in the latter's storyline, from which he emerges the victor. At some point, he encounters Alex, whom he solidly defeats. Ryu encourages the young wrestler to continue honing his abilities against strong opponents. Fascinated by Ryu's skill and determined to become stronger, Alex soon sets out to find Ryu for a rematch. In Oro's ending, Ryu is shown training, but is unaware of Oro's presence, as he has only heard his voice. In his ending, Ryu is under a waterfall practicing his mind and body. He mumbles about the meaning of a true warrior, why he needs to be strong, and reminisces his youthful days. A single leaf falls over him, and he crushes the leaf with his left hand. Ryu believes that as long as his strong opponents and some fierce battles will excite him, he will possess the strength to move even one of his fingers, and decides to keep on fighting.
In Street Fighter VI, Ryu recently completed his training overseas and decided to return to Japan to further hone his skills at the prestigious Genbu Temple. The temple's wise priest extended an invitation to Ryu, asking him to participate in a traditional festival by shouldering a portable shrine. Meanwhile, word spread among fighters including Luke and Lily, that Ryu had resumed his training at Genbu Temple, prompting them to pay him a visit with the intention of challenging him. During his stay in Japan, Ryu had learned about his old friend Ken's situation through a mutual acquaintance. However, Ryu made a conscious decision not to involve himself, understanding that Ken must have his valid reasons for choosing not to reach out. This demonstrates Ryu's respect for Ken's personal choices and circumstances. Sharing his plans with the Avatar, Ryu expressed his intention to remain in Japan for the foreseeable future, dedicating himself to his training and further exploring his martial arts journey within the familiar surroundings of his home country.
As fandom states, the brothers Akuma and Gouken were students of Gotetsu. Gotetsu's martial art is a life-threatening pursuit that incorporates diverse martial arts into its execution. He also taught Shun Gokusatsu, a lethal technique which, though extremely powerful, puts its practitioner in substantial danger. It is said that under Gotetsu's teachings, the brothers debated the true nature and path to mastering their fighting style. Gouken, unable to accept the violent nature and the Satsui no Hado of his fighting style, left Gotetsu to begin his own dojo, which Gotetsu did not oppose. Akuma continued Gotetsu's teachings and vowed to use their fighting style as it was intended. He relinquished all empathy to the principle of Satsui no Hado in order to gain knowledge of Shun Gokusatsu. Further, Akuma realized his limit as a martial artist could be expanded, so he left Gotetsu's guidance of enlightenment to train alone to gain more power. In contrast to Gotetsu, who had been able to use the Satsui no Hado without indulging in its dark side, he developed a lust for combat as a result of embracing the Satsui no Hado fully. When Akuma came back, he entered a death match with Gotetsu to prove his superiority. The Shun Gokusatsu was used by Akuma to kill his master. The master, happy to see his student surpass him, died, and Akuma placed the prayer beads of his dead master around his neck, believing he was the true master. Gouken came to visit his former master to see how he was doing, only to find his lifeless body and his brother, now no longer human. The shocked Gouken, seeing that Akuma had killed their master, confronted him, but Akuma said nothing and left for the woods. Akuma confronted Gouken many years later. He told Gouken that he was not strong enough to face him without giving in to the killing intent. A retort from Gouken accused Akuma of dishonoring his master by showing disrespect to his art, which he explained was much more than death and destruction. Akuma explained to his brother that Gotetsu did not fully comprehend the Satsui no Hado, and that he was a fool for not using it. A fight ensued, and Gouken prevailed. Akuma instructed his brother to kill him, but Gouken had no intention of murdering his own family, which caused Akuma to call his brother weak for sparing the life of a powerful opponent, and told him that he would return. Several years later, it is said that Akuma returned to Gouken's dojo and fought him. Using the Shun Gokusatsu, Gouken had somehow lost his soul during the attack and survived in a coma, but Akuma believed him dead. Ken saw the flash of the attack while running to the dojo, but arrived only to find Gouken on the floor. Akuma was in the woods when Ken confronted him and fought him. When Ken was defeated, Akuma disappeared. In search of worthy opponents, Akuma begins searching the globe. Secluding himself in the shadows, he watches small tournaments and street fights, desperately seeking someone who might be able to match his strength. He then is challenged by a man named Gen. Gen fights a vicious battle, even surviving the Shun Gokusatsu by emptying his soul in time. The moment Akuma begins to wonder if this man is the worthy opponent he is searching for, he senses something is amiss. Akuma's suspicions are confirmed when Gen's mouth bleeds. The competitor is ill, making the match unfair. Gen tells Akuma to kill him after being knocked to the ground. As Akuma can no longer stand the battle any longer, he leaves angering Gen. After the battle, Akuma becomes obsessed with Ryu, trying to awaken the Satsui no Hado within him. Eventually, Ryu finds Akuma's island and challenges him. While Akuma merely tested Ryu, Ryu eventually won the battle. Akuma regains composure and tells Ryu to find him again once he has embraced the Satsui no Hado, before striking the ground with a powerful blow and disappearing. Ryu lies in the ocean as the island collapses around him. He contemplates Akuma's words. As he leaves his destroyed home, Akuma remembers all the fighters he had faced and wonders with anticipation if one day he will encounter someone strong enough to kill him. He finds a desolate cavern and begins to train, looking forward to the day he will face Ryu again. At some point, he defeats and kills a Muay Thai fighter. Adon sees this as a challenge and sets out to find Akuma, to fight him and prove that he is stronger. In his ending, he comes to the realization that worthy opponents have challenged him during his journey. He decides that he could stay on Earth to perfect his killing power, knowing that they are opponents that Akuma can consider worthy. While thinking about the opponents he challenged, there are visions of Gen and Bison and Ryu on the moon. He then comments that he will be the next to die. While waiting for Ryu to embrace the Satsui no Hado, Akuma wanders the globe in search of worthy opposition. He is confronted by Adon, who wishes to establish his fighting style as supreme. Akuma easily wins, but instead of killing Adon, he just leaves, apparently deeming his defeated foe as unworthy. Sometime later, Akuma is intercepted by Guy, who refuses to allow him to see M. Bison. Akuma ignores Guy's pleas and engages him in combat. The two then decide to end the fight after they realize their primary objective was the same, defeating M. Bison. He then confronts Bison, who tells Akuma that he won't be able to defeat him as long as the psycho drive exists. Akuma berates the dictator for not relying solely upon his fists, and they fight. As Akuma emerges victorious, he completely terminates Bison with the raging demon, causing him to suffer horribly as the attacks kill him. In his ending, Akuma is then challenged by Gen once more, and they fight a second battle, the results of which are unknown. Ryu rejected the Satsui no Hado during his own battle with the Shadowloo leader, M. Bison, declaring that a true warrior does not rely on violent intent. In Super Street Fighter II Turbo, it is said that Akuma did not officially enter the second World Warrior Tournament, but did monitor the event that took place in hope of finding an adequate challenge. He also challenged Bison, though whether or not Bison accepted his challenge, and if the result of the fight, if the former did happen, is left ambiguous. Akuma then is left as multiple participants engaged Bison. In a non-canon event, he ambushed the host, M. Bison, and made short work of him with the Shungoku Satsu. Bison is obliterated in an instant. Akuma then engages in combat with the second finalist, but the identity of this warrior, as well as the outcome of the bout, remains unknown. In both the original Super Street Fighter II Turbo and its HD remake, Akuma has two different endings, depending on who the final opponent is. If it's M. Bison, Akuma will muse on the fact that he did not master the Psycho power and let it control him. If it's Shin Akuma, he will reflect on his victory over his own darkness and consider death beneath him. Super Street Fighter II Turbo Revival combines both endings into a whole one, while Ultra removes the second ending, thus causing the first ending to always play regardless of if Akuma beats M. Bison or Shin Akuma.
In Street Fighter IV, sometime before the Third World Warrior Tournament, Ryu and Akuma would duel, with Akuma dominating the fight. As he rebukes Ryu about his rejection of the Dark Hado, Ryu finds the strength to recover and fight back. However, Ken would interrupt the fight, forcing Akuma to leave. During the events of Seth's tournament, he continues his training and senses the Satsui no Hado re-emerging within Ryu. Immediately, he sets off to find Ryu and help him realize this power so he can try to kill him in battle. Like other tournaments, Akuma does not officially enter, but stays in the shadows. Later, he finds an unconscious Ryu in the care of his brother Gouken. Akuma noticed that his brother had perfected the power of nothingness. The two brothers fought, with Ryu being the prize. Both survived their fight, and Ryu was saved by Gouken. Akuma then continued his training and his search for a worthy opponent to match his own, raising an entire forest with his power. In Alina's ending in Ultra Street Fighter IV, she is shown to have befriended him in one of her flashbacks. In Onyx's intro, his roar echoes through the night. Instantly after, his presence causes the explosion of a nearby tree and the death of a bird. He then looks up and proclaims that he is evil incarnate. In his ending, he stands in the center of a volcano. Then he only jumps up and chops the ground with his hand, resulting in an instant eruption that engulfs him in lava. As the lava explodes out of the volcano, Oni flies out of it unharmed, laughing manically and yelling ferociously. In Street Fighter V Prologue, Muro Tensho. In Akuma's story, he and Gen fight once again. Akuma becomes victorious in the battle, but was criticized by Gen for leading to the path of discarding humanity. He then finishes and seemingly kills Gen off for good. He then sees a vision of Ryu rejecting the Satsui no Hado, much to his frustration. Nikali appears and challenges Akuma for her soul. Not only did Nikali lose to Akuma, but he attempts to devour Akuma, and Akuma does the Muro Tensho to escape Nikali's stomach. He then seeks Ryu and battles him. In a Satsui no Hado vs Munoken clash, Akuma defeats Ryu in battle, but does not kill him. Instead, he questions if there is no one that can match him. Ryu, smiling while lying on the ground, asks questions to Akuma, claiming that his fists will continue to communicate with Akuma on opposite ends. Akuma then flees, letting fate determine when those two will meet again. Akuma appears in Kage's character story, which took place prior to encountering Nikali, after realizing Ryu's rejection from the Satsui during a Shadow Falls episode.
After Kage went after Sagat, Akuma is the said shadow demon's next target. To prove his former host Ryu is nothing without him, Akuma considers Kage as nothing more than a soulless silhouette of his former host. Just as Kage mockingly claims he kept part of him at bay because of his beliefs in laws of heaven, a nearly beaten Akuma mocks Kage for not understanding anything aside from only strength and fighting endlessly. Akuma then uses a Hoten Seiken Geki to make Kage disappear from him, and wonders if Kage is the path which Ryu has truly chosen. In Street Fighter III Second Impact, like in the third World Warrior Tournament, Akuma did not enter the fourth World Warrior Tournament, but once again lurked in the shadows. Akuma easily defeated Sean, who mistook him for Ryu. However, he did not realize that Gil had risen from the dead when he pulled off a Shungoku Satsu on him. He then faces Ryu, asking him to show him his full power, but Ryu replies that malicious intent is not the way of the warrior. In this game, he appears as a secret boss, using the raging demon on whoever the player is facing. He battles the player afterwards. If Akuma is felled, the scenery will darken, the ground will shake, and he will get back up and unleash his true power for a second fight. Akuma trained relentlessly over this period of time, harnessing his power and learning several new attacks. Some were meant to create tidal waves, others were described as powerful enough to split Uluru, Ayer's Rock, in half, and one could kill an opponent with a single blow. Kongo Konguretsu-san is a technique taught by Akuma himself, in which he channels all his power into one hand and smashes it into the ground, creating a vortex of energy upward around him. According to legend, this technique was used to destroy his original training ground, the Onigami Isle Gwendo. It is also said that the same technique can cause the earth itself to crumble beneath him. In Street Fighter III Third Strike, despite his now incredible fighting skills, Akuma even fought with Oro in a simple, inconclusive battle, sensing each other's enormous ki and testing their abilities. Both men were impressed by each other's power, but they held some contempt for each other on a personal level. The episode also reveals that Akuma is now able to remain underwater, under massive pressure, and even destroy the sunken remains of a modern inner ship with his Tensho Gaireki Jing technique.
If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date on new theories and info. Thank you for watching. This has been your Street Fighter host. Welcome to the center stage.
Our new Discord server. There you can talk with us, chat about current events going on in Street Fighter, information, theories, and lore. We'll leave the link in the description box below. We want to thank everyone for tuning in and becoming part of this Street Fighter community. We want to thank you for your positive comments towards our channel, because it only habilitates us to grow even more. From the Street Fighterverse crew, we thank you.